Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware of true crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand the perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out into the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases.
Hello, everyone. Glad you're able to join us tonight. We've got a special guest tonight, Dr. Susan. We'll be discussing serial offenders, and what will happen is we discuss when we have a short presentation. Always be mindful in chat to be respectful of families, mods, each other, and of our guests. And we'll be discussing probably just about any type of case that you wish. So whenever if you have a special type of serial offender you want to talk about or a certain case, um, we will absolutely see what Dr. Susan's opinion of those are. But if you're new to this channel, we absolutely welcome you and appreciate you being here tonight. And well, with that being said, let me bring her up. Hello.
Hi there, how are you?
Dr. Susan. I am doing great. How are you, Dr. Susan?
I am doing well. I'm doing well this evening. It's good to be here.
Good,
Good to
good.
be
If
here.
you
Talk
would,
about great, fantastic people in our society.
oh, wow. Yeah, I'm telling you, yeah, we're on opposite poles of everybody, we try to rationalize their thinking process, which is impossibility. But if you would, give a brief introduction of yourself, please.
Sure. I'm a retired clinical psychologist. I have a doctorate degree in clinical psychology. I worked for about 18 years, primarily treating with a focus primarily in treating trauma and PTSD, among other things, teaching and training and a variety of things. And so I've always had a personal interest in true crime. Part of my job also involved doing forensic evaluations. So I'm familiar with those, but they weren't for criminal purposes, they were for other reasons.
Mhm.
Um, but I know the kind of difference in how they approach that and some
Okay.
neuropsychological. So
Okay.
yeah, now
All
I'm
right.
retired,
All
hanging
right.
out,
All right. Well,
doing true crime.
we got a slide or two that you have provided us, and we're going to discuss those. We'll bring them up right quick. Um, and I know that there's a lot of different things about characteristics and the definition of some of these characteristics of these psychopaths. But if you would, just give a brief description of what this slide tells us.
Sure. So serial killers will meet the definition of being a psychopath
Mm-hmm.
according to the scale that is used to measure that. Not all psychopaths are murderers. Not all murderers are serial killers. But I would say all serial killers are psychopaths. So they tend to be pretty egocentric people. They may have a grandiose sense of self. With serial killers, you can also see some difficulties with inferiority complexes, feeling very sort of like misunderstood by the world, along with feeling that they're better than everyone else. And why doesn't everyone understand why I'm special? But something's wrong, you know. They have a low frustration tolerance. They're easily bored. They're high sensation seeking people. There's very chronic pathological lying, deception, and manipulation. They don't feel emotions the way a quote normal person does. Um, they they have superficial social relationships in that they may be married, have kids, and appear to be a loving spouse or parent, but there's 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 really no feeling there. If they disappeared the next day, it would be like, yeah, whatever. Um, they have no remorse or guilt for the crimes that they
Hmm.
commit or any way that they hurt people. No empathy, no sense of morality.
Hmm.
Um, uh,
With all
they,
these with all these issues that you're stating here, how are
mm-hmm.
they able to just interact and hide in plain sight? And how do we miss all these characteristics, and we only in hindsight uh, are able to identify them?
One thing that I was looking at that makes a serial killer sort of their own niche group. They're somewhat different from this general um, list of categories. Is they they want to be perceived as being a moral, honest, upstanding member of the community. They want others to look like that, and they can create a a persona. I think that one of the famous books about Bundy is called The Mask of Sanity. And that is what they create. And so what is presented to the world um, is BTK, deacon in his church. You know, that's the face that they show. Looks like a nice looking guy. Doesn't
Mhm.
give you the creeps.
Mhm.
He's walking to his Volkswagen, got his arm in a cast and drops his books. Are you gonna help him up? Pick his books up? Yeah, sure you are. And then
Mhm.
you're gonna see this guy.
Yes.
That.
And of course, when you see this guy, I mean, he wouldn't do this in a public display. He would do it once he has total control of the victim, I would assume, and in an area of where he controls and where there's not the ability for the victim to have any um, um, alternative. That their future is pretty well set, I would imagine, by the time the victim sees this.
Yeah, yeah, and they're getting extremely excited at the point of what they called sort of the capture
Mhm.
them, and there's a process that they tend to go through, unlike say a spree killer or unfortunately we have plenty of them the kid that takes the gun to school and shoots up the
Mhm.
school,
Mhm.
or somebody that's my girlfriend left me, I'm going to get back at her for leaving me. And so what they do is they plot and plan, and part of the plotting and the searching for their victim and the fantasizing about that
Mhm.
is part of the excitement for them. They don't they don't um they don't normal human experiences don't give them a thrill. This does,
Okay.
um,
All right.
and sometimes for different reasons.
Yeah, the
Um,
pursuit, which is now we have different types of offenders that some,
mhm,
of course, um, and because you have people like BTK, his victims of where he found them versus what Bundy. Bundy go to public places didn't bother him. It didn't matter how many people saw him during the abduction or the pursuit
mhm.
or that moment of capture. Is that moment of capture, saying the two ladies on the beach that day that he took it within hours of each other, um, is that I take as part of his pursuit and is also part of the capture, correct or not?
Y- Yes, and it's part of the thrill because he's getting away with it in plain sight.
Mhm.
Um,
Now with BTK, was his totally the one, because he said that he had numerous uh, people on his target list of potential of whatever he would call
Mm-hmm.
those, that he had numerous ones that he was tracking at any one time. Um, so, it, what did they share any traits, or would that type of offender share certain traits, or are they totally on the opposite end of the spectrums of the serial offenders?
Um, they tend to seek out and stalk, follow, um, plot and plan for a type of victim that has some kind of appeal or meaning to them. Um, the majority of Ted Bundy's victims were tall, thin, college-age females with long brown hair. Um, BTK's victims kind of bounced around in looks and things, so I'm not always certain exactly what his focus was. The other thing that's important to them is the location where they're going to commit the killing. Um, they want to be familiar with that location. And so they are more likely, the more and if they're an organized serial killer, they're more likely to have familiarity with where they're where they're getting them from and where they're taking them to.
Okay. Now, with some of the
Um,
more recent cases that are in the news right now, that we have these one-time offenders, possibly, or they're potential budding serial offenders, or they've
mhm.
had victims in the past we haven't identified, such as Richard Allen or Kohlberger, specifically those, because those are the cases I cover and know a little bit about. But
Yeah,
but the
they're
potential of them, of those two types of personalities, of what you've seen in the news, and I know that you can't do any type of analysis of them because you haven't, whatever your professional uh,
yeah,
terms.
I cannot diagnose
Hmm.
anybody that I haven't personally interviewed,
Hmm. Yeah.
and things like that. So I can only hypothesize people like
Uh-huh.
them, or sort of based
Okay.
on what
Well,
they've
let's
reported.
hypothesize them then.
Hypothesize away.
Let's just hypothesize them. Now, what is the potential? Let's do one at each. Let's do Richard Allen first, because with Libya and Abby as the victims, and the time frame
Okay.
in the cold case. Um, what was your thoughts when you first heard about that case, and then where it wound up? Was it surprising or not?
Um, when I first heard about it, um, I I I thought serial killer and Evansdale. I I I think that was my first thought was, oh, the Evansdale guy
Uh-huh.
probably did this.
Hmm.
And I know you've looked at
Oh, I did.
similarities and differences in that, and probably a lot of people have.
And I thought the same
I
until I visited both locations. And once I visited both locations and saw the differences in what it would take for one individual, then of course that went off the table. But until then, I was with you. There was a lot of similarities, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and there's so in some ways there's so little that we know about what the actual crime. I mean, the rumors about the weird scene, are their signatures. Some serial killers do leave signatures, not all
Mhm.
of them. Um, they, for it to be Richard Allen, the guy who, average looking guy, works at the CVS. that didn't surprise me.
Mhm. Now,
That didn't
looking at
surprise,
his
and
current state, and of course we only have images of him walking. I mean, we don't. I mean, he may, as
right,
soon as he gets
and what
within
his
his
defense
cell,
attorney
he,
is saying.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Once he gets in his cell, he may be totally different and everything. But there
exactly.
has been a tremendous amount of change in his physical um, uh, looks, and from if you take his attorney's word for it, he's also has declined emotionally, physically, mentally, any way he could decline, he's
Mm-hmm.
declined. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't see that, with Bundy or with BTK. And uh, is is this something that certain personalities will just absolutely the pressures of the world will do that to them, or is this or is it something that uh, these individuals would do to try to get pity? Um,
Well, I think, we saw that with the Golden State Killer, who, was coming into court and hobbling or in a wheelchair, I think, and looking very feeble and weak. And then they have video of watching him in his cell, and he's walking around like normal and acting like he doesn't have any problems at all.
mhm,
Um, the Anybody, though, when they are in solitary confinement, and I don't know if Bundy was as isolated away as Richard Allen is, or if
mhm,
BTK was as isolated away.
mhm,
um, that you do that to any human being, and the lack of stimuli, because if he's on a suicide watch, they're giving him, he doesn't have books to read, he doesn't have, he has very little to do, he has no people to interact with.
mhm,
He's probably not sleeping very well. It you know heard that it's loud, that the other prisoners maybe, and the guards maybe saying a lot
mhm,
of nasty stuff to him.
mhm. All right.
That we have seen that anybody put into those circumstances, including psychopaths, can start to melt down, and they
Mhm.
they all have their strengths and weaknesses. So for him to be displaying depression, and high levels of stress, it would not be abnormal.
All right.
Um,
Well, let's look at the
and they have
opposite
to
pole.
balance. Oh, sorry.
I
Mm-hmm.
said let's look at the opposite end of this of another individual that's on the same bus for justice that
Mm-hmm.
Richard Allen is, and that's Kohlberger. You see
Yeah.
him when he comes to court. He's dressed. He's um, doing his best Ted Bundy impression that you could ever do, is being dressed up, well presented, well mannered in
Yeah.
court, and absolutely fit and looking 180 degrees from what Richard Allen is, and
Mm-hmm.
which gives me a lot of red flags of this man. If he is guilty of what he's accused of, he is one dangerous individual, in my opinion.
Abs- Absolutely. Absolutely. I think he's an extremely dangerous person. Um, I think he has a level of self confidence and um, sense of superiority that he has probably convinced himself that he's going to beat this, or he's going to be able to escape, or something like that.
Well, that's
I
what
would
Ted Bundy
imagine
did.
he's sitting
Yeah,
there plotting, and yeah, Ted Bundy,
yeah,
yeah, more than once, and he lost so much weight it was so he could fit through the bars
yeah. So
in
yeah, on
the
Bundy,
window or
absolutely.
something.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
but the common traits between and just like I said, from my uh, understandings of how Bundy was and how Bundy acted and through the court system, that I see a lot of parallels between Bundy and Kohlberger. I don't know what Kohlberger's past is, but I'm sure law enforcement has a far greater understanding of that and what his potential is and was. Because I think he had tremendous potential. If he hasn't had other victims, he would have other victims at some point. That's just my opinion.
I I would agree with that. I would agree with that. And when you look at the things that are documented, the stalking, he was on Instagram accounts, at least one of them. He was coming by the house, at least 12 times. We don't know if he went by their places of work or where they had were taking classes. So, that's not, or at least we don't know that yet. I don't know if they're able to get that information, but, the sort of the plotting and the planning and if he was wearing the all dark clothes and where he parked, he
Yeah.
didn't wind up executing, I think, as well. I'm surprised he picked the house. I think picking the house as opposed to taking one of, if it was just one of the women that he was fixated on, that he didn't either remove them from the house
And that's
and
a
take
great
them
point, or the
elsewhere.
fact that he
Yeah.
may have thought of doing that, but when he went in the room, now we have two in there versus the target that he
Mm-hmm.
might have thought that he could have um, extracted from the residence and taken them somewhere else. That's a good. I hadn't thought about that possibility, but that is a possibility that due to um, the other being there that uh, didn't the plan started falling apart instantly. Uh,
Mm-hmm. I
but go ahead.
it has always seemed that has always seemed like something that went very wrong. Like either he would have killed everybody in the entire house, or just one person, or
Mhm.
something like that. It's why those four people, not the other two. It seems like something was going wrong. When I was looking at some things today, they talked about when they interviewed serial killers that they've caught, that they learn from experience.
Oh yes.
So they do a better job the second time than they did the first time. The first time can be very, can get very chaotic, and they make mistakes. I think BTK talked about that as well. The first time either the dog was there, or somebody came, the husband came home, I think,
Mhm.
and he wasn't expecting the husband to come home. Something unexpected happened, and so he adjusted the way he stalked his victims based on that. So that could, that yeah, I think something went wrong.
Now
um
with like BTK, he was a strange individual, whereas Bundy didn't communicate with law enforcement. But we have certain offenders like Zodiac. You have BTK
mhm,
that they want their names out there. Then you have individuals like
yeah.
the Golden State that he would contact um, people or potential victims on phones and things and communicate. But what drives them for that communication thing? Because, like I said, Bundy, he didn't seek limelight; these others do. Um, is that part of their
uh
fantasy
it
or their drive or the pursuit or what?
it it is that instilling fear in people. Son of Sam, David Berkowitz, also I think was started leaving notes at or at the scene of the crime, or at least at one, communicated maybe several times. He the whole city was terrorized um, by that, and um, I think that's part of the enjoyment, sitting there watching it on the news, and the narcissism. They can't figure out who I am, and you know, everybody's scared, everybody's watching out, and you know, it's they one study I ran across today, what they were looking at was with some brain imaging that was really interesting. We've got brains, we got brains up here right now, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But is they took uh, psychopaths, and there were serial killers that were involved in this study, and and show them visual of like a video of a person intentionally inflicting pain on another person, and the other person emoting the experience of pain. And when you see you know, if you're looking at the picture that we're looking at right now, the the more red and moving into white, you know, sort of looks like when a thunderstorm, it's kind of the same thing when a thunderstorm's coming into the area. The darker it is, the more activity is going on. Um, when shown something that was, when shown that, what what would turn on for normal people is the areas of the brain that recognizes empathy, like, oh my gosh, it must hurt so much to get hit with a baseball bat. Oh, this is terrible. Oh, this poor person. Um, that doesn't turn on for the psychopath or the serial killer. What does turn on is the part of the brain that experiences pleasure and excitement and satisfaction and happiness.
Hmm.
So the experience of pain and suffering for others makes them feel good. So to confound people, to frighten people, um, and and be able to watch that, they love it. Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
take it they're drawn to more of the horror movie type of. I mean, do they? Seeing that, is that what they would enjoy more as they horror shows or horror movies versus, you know, uh, comedies, or is that something that uh,
I
there's
don't
any
know.
studies on?
I don't know. I don't
Because
know.
you know, in
I
those you
I could.
see, yeah, I mean, you see the pursuits, you see the capture, you see everything that Jason or Michael is doing, that they're chasing them, and as they chase them, that um, uh, could they feed off of other pursuits through the horror movies? I was just wondering.
Um, I I guess it's possible. Because one thing I'm thinking of is like the studies they've done with like violent video games, and is playing violent video games increase, you know, the levels of aggression and violence, and you know, violent cartoons, that kind of thing that's been around for a long time. And they're finding it really isn't sort of linked. I My first thought is the level of narcissism. I can see them watching it and and thinking, you know, I would have done it this way. That was a stupid way
Oh
to
yeah,
do that.
yeah. Who won't create a
Sort of
movie to inspire them?
critiquing.
Yeah.
I could see them um, critiquing, critiquing it, but um, I I I'm not sure. I'm not sure if
Okay.
they're, you know, they
I
got
was
the
just curious about
investigation
that. If
Discovery
the movie,
Channel
yeah,
on.
yeah.
That's a good question. Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
curious about that. If it would, the superiority complex you spoke about earlier, these type of offenders, uh, do they ever overcompensate for that, or and how? What would that look like to uh, how they compensate for all the faults that they have?
Hmm. Usually, a lot of times, it they they don't tend to take responsibility. They twist it into, um, you know, you made me so mad, you made me hit you. because you made me so mad. Otherwise, I wouldn't have hit you. So it's your fault that you made me angry and I punched you in the face. So
I've
they
seen
spin
that
it
in
around.
domestic. Yes, I've seen that with
The ex,
abusive. Yes.
yeah, they do a lot of gaslighting, and that's kind of commonly known as gaslighting people and kind of twisting things around. Um, they also tend to, an organized serial killer who is, they tend to be above average in intelligence. They tend to be extremely good at mimicking, putting that mask on, um, being the person they want others to see. And oftentimes it's the victims that are representing some sense of their feeling of inadequacy. Um, the pretty blonde girls didn't want to date me, so I'm going to enjoy killing pretty blonde girls.
Okay.
Um, and there was one who, well, it always comes up that serial killers are like all adopted. They are not all adopted.
Oh yeah.
And being adopted has nothing to do with being a serial killer. There's no cause and effect in that.
Hmm.
Um, and and but gosh, I just blanked out. Uh, it's one. I think it was Kenneth Bianchi or
Yes.
Joel Rifkin. It may have been who thought his birth mother was a prostitute,
Hmm.
and so was very angry at his birth mother. Felt abandoned, rejected, and so he was killing prostitutes were and sort of acting out that sense of rejection and feeling of abandonment and taking that out on them while having the normal face, hi honey, I'm home, and hi, welcome to CVS, how can I help
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
um,
Oh yes. Oh
so
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
We got a
He
few
was, and
questions.
they say he was the nicest guy at the store. He was always the most helpful. He was always
Hmm.
friendly. Yeah,
It's absolutely amazing how we were advised by law enforcement, Doug Carter, that they always said that he's in plain sight, and it absolutely turns out not only was he, but almost all these offenders. I mean, because to become a serial offender, you have to be out there for some length of time and have multiple victims, and so for that to come to pass, we have to that they will hide in plain sight for sometimes years until either
yeah,
DNA catches up to them or we have some type of break in the case. And
yeah,
but anyway, we got a few
yeah.
questions for you, and
Never caught Zodiac, as far as I know.
not yet, but hopefully the DNA profiles and the um, that
Yeah,
will come to pass. That they will identify him soon. Hopefully. All right.
You ready?
Yeah, we're ready. You ready for a question or two there, Dr.
absolutely.
Susan? All right.
All right, so we're going to start off with Josh. In crime shows, I always hear delineations between psychopaths and sociopaths. What's the difference, especially since you say serial offenders are psychopaths?
My apologies, Mrs. Steve. I probably said words that are demonetizing words over and over again.
That's all right.
Uh,
You're
yeah,
we
it's
We're good.
we're
educational.
good. You're good. You go
You're
ahead.
okay. Um, that's a great question, Josh. Uh, kind of in general lingo for non-professionals, they don't distinguish psychopath, sociopath. If you're looking at sort of the professional definitions that a mental health provider would look at, a psychopath is going to, sort of have all of those characteristics that were listed before, lack any kind of moral character, um, not follow societal norms. And the difference that we see between a sociopath and a psychopath is that a sociopath does have a set of values and norms and morals that they feel very strongly about, the way a normal person feels strongly about values and morals. Their values and morals just don't always match up with what society thinks what the values and morals of society are. Um, you know, their value could, their moral standard could be that I don't believe in paying taxes, and it's not fair that I pay taxes, so I'm not going to.
Mhm.
And and they meet lower levels of these. They do experience emotions on a more normative level. They do have sensations of guilt and things like that. So they're a less severe, and oftentimes it's like their moral values are not what general society thinks is okay, but it's okay in their head.
Okay.
So they're not really doing anything wrong.
Excellent. All right, let's go. What's the next one there?
All right. SP74, Dr. Susan, aside from serial offenders, how often do you see
Homiciders.
homiciders who are
I'm,
who are
I'm
not
gonna, I'm,
psychopaths?
yeah,
You got
I'm gonna,
that one. You got that
I'm gonna
uh,
create some words here tonight. Homiciders,
unalivers,
unalivers, homiciders.
uh,
one.
uh, uh, yeah. Okay. Well, serial offenders would be considered psychopaths. It may just that's just how I'm reading that. And very, very often, I would think that you oftentimes in more a situation like a rage killing,
Oh yes,
a
yeah. I
domestic
worked a
a
lot of
domestic fight that
homicides.
gets
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
worked a lot of homicides that was just either from domestics or out of either some type of robberies, those things versus of not being a serial offender. That is just a one-off thing that someone is either under the influence of something that would commit a homicide or during a robbery or something like that. But it's not of the
Hmm.
being driven by whatever fantasy world.
Right. Also um, a lot of the school shooters, when they start really investigating them, are are not meeting that criteria. They're too young technically to be labeled as this, but they're not showing because these behavior patterns are going to start early.
Okay.
Um, and but they're not oftentimes not showing signs of being a psychopath. They're showing signs of being in significant mental distress,
Okay.
and oftentimes with psychosis and things like that, minus the Eric kid from
Okay.
Columbine. That
Yeah.
he's more of the bad seed, and the Dylan was
Okay. All
just
right. All right.
I don't know what kind of mouse he was.
All
All
right. We
right.
got another
And
one.
from Josh, are all or most serial offenders driven by fantasies?
I um well we never want to say all in psychology, so because but but I
No.
would say the vast majority are driven by fantasies, and it is what is their fantasy. What they have different types of fantasies, but the fantasy creates the excitement for them. So fantasizing, planning the act,
Okay.
fantasizing, going around and stalking, fantasizing, grabbing the person and getting them under control, fantasizing the
Follow.
unaliving,
Mhm.
and um, yeah, So the fantasy element is huge for them.
Mhm. Now we got another one.
From Josh. He's been a busy boy. Dr. Susan, I'm assuming, were you ever involved in determining,
Competency.
I can say that, competency? Now y'all got me nervous about what I can say. Competency for courts. What do you look at to determine competency?
I was never, well, okay. Any determination of competence, okay. I was never hired, I never worked for the legal system to
Okay.
determine competency for a criminal or civil trial. I did do evaluations of people to see were they competent to manage their own funds, were they things like that, and usually more on and oftentimes this was either patients with some kind of issue going on that they were incapacitated to the extent that they couldn't. But what we're looking for is, are they alerts? Are they here and now? Are they alert and oriented to time, place, and self? So what day is it today? What time is it? What's your name? Where are you? And why are you here? Who am I? What are we doing here?
Okay.
And then and then just sort of depending on what we're trying to find out, I may say, here's a bottle of medication. Can you tell me what this medication is? So but in terms of like a criminal case, what he needs for in an evaluation, they're going to be real careful with this guy because it's so high profile. But it is basically, does he know what he's charged for and understand that? Does he know who he is and where he is, and essentially pretty close enough to what day it is? Does he? Well, I mean, I'm sure one day is like the next for him.
Yeah.
You get a little off.
You see people lose time of the calendar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now another one here that says, how do you become a psychopath? Are you born with it or is it inherited? Which I guess is kind of the same thing. If you inherit it, then you're born with it.
It can be. And if Mrs. Steve could drop back to one of the brain picture slides.
Okay.
Yeah, let's not stare at Ted. What they are finding is that there is a lot of that there's a strong genetic component to being a psychopath. It is a stronger genetic component than schizophrenia, which has has a pretty strong genetic component. What they're finding is that if we're looking at this picture right here, these are brain scans. This is your head from, if you were to split your brain down the middle, and you're looking at it at the side from the inside. Leah, I can answer your question in a second. And so the more lit up it is, the more activity you're seeing. So in response to emotional stimuli, we're seeing normal activation in the areas that we want to see it. In the psychopath, these areas, when the brain at the bottom, that the part to the left and the part to the back and the part to the middle, those not being lit up, the front area, that's where we make our good judgments, decisions, morals. It's our conscience, essentially. Our rules live up there. And then the part that's real bright blue that sort of look like a little island, that's the emotional center of the brain. And so what they find is that they don't have that emotional reaction. Those areas do not light up in response to that, and that and they're 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 not con- they're not connected. Some of the areas of the brain are smaller. The pathways of the signals are not getting back and forth, and they are kind of to get to Leah's question, um, is is um, is well, is a lot of this is really new, so it's coming out in maybe about the past 5 years. In the past, I think there was the article that I found on the kids was about a year or two old. So the technology has improved. They have to get more and more numbers. And so they're finding the same thing when we're looking at 7, 8, 9, 10-year olds who are displaying, um, severe behavioral problems. They're finding the same structural abnormalities and the same this same picture, compared to kids the same age that don't have this problem. So it can be genetics. It can be, something goes wrong during the pregnancy. It could be, um, one another thing that I found when I was looking through some stuff today is nearly all of the serial killers had a history of pretty significant head injuries. Um, so, you know, uh, Richard Ramirez, for one, had at least two severe concussions and then developed epilepsy, and epilepsy will consistently cause brain damage over time. So it's yeah, it's a little scary to think about that we can see this in kids, and they're working on, because they're like, oh, we're finding this in that we're able to see this, working on treatments and strategies, because when the brain's still forming, and that maybe if they are aggressively work on, they know this is starting to happen, that they can remold,
Okay.
through medications or through different types of therapies, and they are finding some early success with that in controlled environments with children.
Okay. Now,
So,
is there a lot of psych differences between serial
excuse me.
offenders, the ones that communicate with police and those that don't? Are there a lot of psych differences? Are they pretty common? The traits very similar or not between the two? It's just a personality issue.
Oh, I don't know. I think there's it's I think that we don't have enough numbers to say that it's definitely linked to one thing or another. They tend to be more like this or more like that, because one of the things that does make it harder with studying serial killers is that they're thankfully a small percentage of the population, that they have available, and so I don't know. I don't know.
Do you have a go-to book about criminal psychology for lay people?
Oh, like the study, like forensics, uh,
Uh, yeah, I don't
like
know. Yeah, I'm
ooh,
I'm sure there's no. short answer for that because there's evolutions, and I'm sure there's little online. You probably,
I can hold. I would look at anything by Dr. Catherine Ramsland, Ramsland, whose name may be familiar to people
from
because
Koberger. Yes.
BK took a class with her. But she is a very, very well known forensic psychologist, and she wrote uh, BTK's autobiography for him with permission from the families, and the profits went to the families. And I think she has written books for textbooks for students as well as lay people.
Any opinion about this? Is this part of their, or does this even play a part in the building of these individuals? This question here: why do some children that play video games end up psycho and some don't?
It's
Is there preconditioning, or is it anything of that sort that, or does it feed anything, or
what what they've found is that children who are more aggressive, are more of a behavioral problem, are more violent, tend to gravitate towards more violent video games. So but if you put a kid that doesn't have, behavior problems, conduct problems, and things like that, that it's not going to scar him for life. They tend to gravitate towards what they like. Um, um, you know, and and in some ways, maybe that is a way to blow off steam. That is, well, it's probably not the best thing. I wouldn't suggest it.
I
I wouldn't
understand?
suggest it.
I need to
Yeah.
take a break just 1 second. We've got 2 blue lights coming up.
Okay.
Oh, blue light
We've
special.
got Brenda Birkenback gave 1 and Cynthia. So thank you very much.
They give membership.
They donated a membership.
Thank you. We appreciate that support. It absolutely helps us do what we do. Thank you.
Yes. All right. And then the next one is coming from Anne. What are Dr. Susan's thoughts about what seem to be one-off offenders, such as it looks the BG perp may have been in Delphi?
Yeah. Yeah. If this is Richard Allen's only offense, what?
Yeah, it is.
Um,
It is.
Yeah, but and as far as we know, a one-off. Meaning that they did it once and
yes.
were
What would
I
trigger him to do this one time? If for these offenders that for whatever reason just come out of nowhere, out of left field, and all of a sudden they go out and commit a double homicide, and then they go back into a pattern and a cold case for 6 years that we know. Now, part of the all the attention may have kept individual like Richard Allen uh, limited his abilities to continue, which may have played a part. We don't know, but what would trigger him or an individual just to commit such a crime out of nowhere?
My best hypothesis on that, when you see people who have committed a crime and they unaliving, and they don't ever do that again, is usually an extreme stress response. Sort of um, every everything in their life has just fallen to pieces, and they're overwhelmed. They're usually they hurt themselves, um, and but I think sometimes they will, if they're angry enough, they'll take it out on somebody else, um, or somebody who has enough restraint generally, who sort of fantasizes about this but wouldn't do it, but would likes to watch shows about it or something, but they're like, no, I couldn't do that myself. But then they develop maybe a substance abuse problem, or yeah, and they, their spouse leaves them, and they lose all their money and they're living in their car. Um, they get pushed over the edge, and those people be, oftentimes feel, or either feel so much remorse or horror at what they've done once they've kind of woken up the next day.
Time to
That
reflect. Yeah. This
yeah.
here says, does Dr. Susan think psychopaths are born, or is it from abuse or illnesses as a young child? Is there any data on that?
There is. So there's a strong genetic component. So if you have a parent that is a psychopath, you're it it shows up in the it can show up. It's not 100. It's not 100%. It's there's a potential for it. Um, and an illness that would cause damage to the brain, a head injury, or an illness that caused loss of oxygen to the brain for whatever reason, or brain injury, stroke, meningitis, encephalopathy, something like that. Yes, that could lead to that. I actually know someone who they had a very normal child, and the child got meningitis, and incredibly high fever, which is cooking the brain, and it is an infection in the brain. And after that, this kid was a nightmare, and has been in and out of prison his whole life. Sweetest kid you ever knew before that, and just night and day. So the answer to your question is yes.
Okay.
But I think they did. They're not abuse. Itself is, there are many psychopaths that they're looking at that don't come from any type of abusive background, or a background that has a trauma in it. So, it's being abused or traumatized certainly doesn't help you in your mental health in any way, shape, or form. But it's not a if then.
Okay. Well, SP74 has a question about your profiling abilities. Dr. Susan, what could you
Oh
determine?
gosh.
What could you determine about the Delphi uh, offender, if you homicider offender, if you knew details of the crime?
Ooh.
This is a total profile question here.
Ooh. Here, I'll play the FBI. He's a white male between 18 and 40 years of age. Average height, weight, and build, and looks.
Yeah.
No.
That's well, you see that all the time, and that he was triggered by some issue, and you'll see a change in his appearance and his behavior, and he may talk or look at. That's what they the standard briefing when they do those profiles.
Mm-hmm.
They
Well, and
share a lot of common characteristics.
Yeah, if they've worked well, and if they've worked hard enough at developing that mask, if I'm just the nice guy at CVS. Well,
Mhm.
yeah, I was on the bridge that day, but I told him I was there. I didn't see the girls.
Yeah. Well,
It's all good. But
in the
the,
profiling world, you look at that. At what time of day was it committed? Who has access to be available during those hours? Who who wouldn't be committed to a family, or who would have that knowledge? The victims would be there. Um, Now that's from what they taught us as far as law enforcement profile, which is
mhm.
a little bit different than your studies, but
Yeah. I think if knowing about the crime scene would tell you something about what's going on inside their head, as far as how sadistic. What
yes.
was there a lot of torture
Hmm. Oh yeah.
involved?
Oh
Because
yeah.
some serial killers are very, very focused on on torture. That's one of the parts they enjoy the most. Um, does it does it look like there was any, and I know this is rumor and it's not founded, that I believe Libby was covered with leaves.
Mhm.
So if that is true, if that were true, that would say to me that um, there was some sense of care, or concern, because you will see people be
Mhm.
covered when um, they it's sort of like, in order to they're not cold, or to not, if they were unclothed, to not
Yeah.
show
Hmm.
they're being unclothed.
Yeah.
So that, a horribly tortured person versus somebody who's got a blanket around them. I
Yeah.
mean, they're still sick, a sick, twisted person, but there's something
Yeah.
different going on.
Okay. We're about called up yet?
No.
Okay. All
Oh,
right.
sorry.
We on are there stats on those who target children, as far as serial offenders, and whether they um, and there are stats. The FBI, if you go out there, there's stats on all different types of serial offenders, what age groups, and which when you're targeting this defenseless group of individual children. Um, that's how come we have them register offenders. They're out there, and while they should, you know, you're not going to be able to um, change an individual that targets children. No amount of time in prison that I'm aware of changes those types of offenders. Have you heard of any successes of
No,
work? No, and
no. And actually, once they're adults, we tend not to do psychotherapy with people with antisocial personality disorder, or who are psychopaths, because it makes them better. They learn they learn from us how to be better at manipulating, lying, and messing with people. So uh,
go ahead and put it.
we can't fix it, which
Yeah,
is one of the things that could be a positive about starting to be able to look at this stuff early on, because maybe we can do something if
yeah,
we
to save
intervene
some. Yeah, to save
before the
some children or victims.
yeah, well, and those children too.
Hmm. Yep. All right.
All
Got another
right.
blue light.
Yep. Hold on 1 second for Jocelyn gifted a membership.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so
Appreciate it, Jocelyn.
much. We
That's awesome.
appreciate it. All right. Let me go grab another one. And this here is from 63 Clocks. That is interesting.
Yes. Has there been a rise in society of women falling for serial offenders? There are many that are passionate about the innocence of defendants to the point of being online bullies. And we see that, and there's a term for it. I don't know what it is, of where these women, Ted Bundy, and a lot of these people, and I think they said BK is getting a lot of fan mail. Absolutely crazy.
I'm sure he is. I'm sure he is. Yeah, I saw the term today, and I cannot remember. It ends in file. but that, they all
Yeah.
do. I, I, I can imagine that maybe there has been, simply due to the increase in accessibility, 24-hour news, websites, and it, instead of it being one or, very few cases that ever get heard about, now you hear about all of them. So maybe that comes out more. I don't know much about that, and it doesn't make sense to me.
I don't me either. It's
But
absolutely unreal.
I'm not sure what that is.
oh, I do.
Okay.
I
Okay,
know I do. Okay,
that's
so
good.
okay. So yeah, DID, which is the abbreviation for dissociative identity disorder, is now what is uh, the real, or the term used for what was previously called multiple personality disorder.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
And
Yeah. Yeah. That was on the tip of my tongue. Yeah.
yeah, and
No.
and
No.
and schizophrenia um is uh, is not the same thing as um multiple personality disorder. The two completely different things. And also when they
Then this
talk
goes right
talk
along.
about the sort of the mask that they put on of like this, the psychopath or the serial killer, that is not multiple personalities. They're acting. It's no different than, you know, the actor going on stage playing Hamlet doesn't believe that he's Hamlet when
Mhm.
he's on stage.
All right. This next one falls pretty close on the borderline. Is that anything, borderline personality disorder with a serial offender?
Yes, or most have borderline personality. Oh, borderline personality disorder. That is, it's probably, it's a weird name for a diagnosis. But yes, that is the actual name for the diagnosis. And um, it, I would say no. Uh, Borderline personality disorder. Um, One of the controversies with borderline personality disorder is that it's an antisocial personality disorder, or sort of the what is the specific diagnosis that we use with someone who's a psychopath, can be two sides of the same coin, because of the way that, and that is a problem with the way that the diagnosis for borderline personality disorder, which has to do with unstable identity, unstable relationships, a lot of label,
Mhm.
mood being all over the place. It's a complicated diagnosis, and there's about 60 different ways you can meet criteria for, literally, because you only have to meet like 4 of 10 symptoms. So I've seen patients who all meet criteria for this diagnosis, and they're completely different people. Some of them I would be like, no, they're antisocial. But I think what we find is that they will often diagnose females with antisocial personality disorder with borderline personality disorder instead. So you see a big gender
Mhm.
disparity
Mhm.
in that, and
Mhm.
the answer is no.
A little
I
bit, sure.
mean,
Mhm.
All right, this is for you, Dr. Susan. Blue
Joshua,
light.
kudos to
oh,
that.
thank you, Josh. Well,
It's,
you know, for supporting the channel. That's so
mhm.
nice. Do I have any podcasts or books?
I've tried to talk
Uh,
her into it, and she won't.
No, I don't. I have my dissertation, um, and uh,
Got one more.
Okay.
professional lectures and
Yeah.
things that I've done, but I don't. I hope they're not on film. Um,
Appreciate that. Thank you for that support.
but thank you. That is a really nice compliment. I really, really appreciate
Mhm.
it.
And then Lone Pony has done a fascinating topic. Thank you, Dr. Susan and Mr. and Mrs. Steve. Thank you for your support.
Thank you,
Appreciate that.
Lone
And it is
Pony.
a fascinating topic.
It
You're
is.
absolutely right there.
Yeah, yeah.
Here we go. All right. And from Junior, is it possible to find this out before they become serial offenders?
Uh, it well, it n- this very new research is that they are able to, when we're looking at the brain right here, they are able to see that same pattern of abnormal brain activity in children. And they are doing, working on different treatments and running studies on those treatments. And those treatments are effective in helping them to like experience more normative emotions and fit into the general definition of society standard. The long-term effect of that, we don't know, but it is starting to look like it is possible. They're also looking, because there's so much genetic component to it. They're also doing a lot of gene studies, trying to look at that. Um, so the answer is uh, not widespread right now, but I would imagine in 15 to 20 years, probably yes.
Okay. All right.
In SP74, can you see markers on the DNA of psychopathy like other diseases?
They are. I sort of it briefly looked over some of that stuff, and that is a little that's out of my that's getting a little out of my playing field, of the deep complexities
Okay.
of DNA markers. But there are some articles of isolating quite a few different ones, and I don't I there I it's not like it's gonna I don't think they're going to necessarily find one,
Mhm.
one.
Okay. And from Cynthia, Dr. Susan, I've read childhood trauma can rewire the child's brain. Is this true for psychopaths?
um yes. uh
Ooh.
yes.
Wow.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, it's not going to help them.
Okay.
Very.
Will it have it will it have an impact on them of something that's very traumatizing to
Mhm.
them? Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, a negative impact.
Mhm.
So,
All right. And from Miss, Dr. Susan, do spouses, etc., recognize the bullet points on the slide after they are away from the offender? Or do they pick a partner we'll never see it? That's an interesting question.
um, that's a great question, because it it
The ex
well,
spouses absolutely see all these.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They're not all bitter exes. Some of them need to be believed. Actually, Miss Siren, yes. A lot of times what will happen is people coming out of families that are very dysfunctional like this, or been married to someone like this. Once they are separated from that, um, they may go into therapy. They may start noticing, like, wait, other people's marriages aren't like this. um, you know, and the, you know, and they can sort of begin to start to develop an understanding of what has happened to them. There's actually a very good, oh gosh, what is her name? There's a very good psychologist
Mhm.
who does have a, Dr. Rami, I think it's Rami, who does have a YouTube channel and talks a lot about how to know that if you're in a relationship with a narcissist and an abuser, and goes through things, and people don't always know. They're very, very good at making you think it's all your fault.
Look at the
Um,
eyes. It's all in the
it's
eyes.
you know, I agree. I agree.
I think
You
I,
can see it.
I think on this
Not
next
all of
question,
them. Not all of them.
I think we just had a Freudian slip. I don't think that. Uh, Read this and would
Yeah. No.
would alcohol or drug use during pregnancy cause brain problems, leading to the child becoming a psychologist? Um,
Yes, because we're all crazy.
okay.
We're all nuts.
Well,
Um,
and that's you hear that quite often. That myth or truth. I don't know. You would know better than I how true that is. But
um, I would say we're a quirky bunch.
okay.
Um, but uh, you know, just usually very interested in how the mind works, and
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, like in any field, you're gonna have your real pieces of work and and otherwise. And in something like this, it'll attract people that are, you know, narcissistic because they
Hmm.
like being called doctor. But the question about does drug and alcohol use have, is probably meaning impact on becoming a psychopath. Absolutely.
Okay.
Um, there's such a thing called fetal alcohol syndrome, and uh, you, it does using um, abusing alcohol, um, because different countries and things, you know, moderate use or, you know, occasional use is not going to cause this, but abusing alcohol and drugs while you're pregnant, especially during critical periods of first and second trimester, are going to result in some serious neurological problems with the
Okay.
child.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. We
So
got
sad. All right. And Mike D.
great discussion. Thanks. Thank you, Mike. We appreciate your support.
We
Awesome.
appreciate that.
Absolutely
All
awesome.
right. And let's see here. Uh, Mothi 187. Have you looked at the brain scans of other cluster B disorders, BPD, etc.? How do they compare or differ from a psychopath?
I haven't looked at that. I haven't looked at that, but now I'm interested in that. I was just about to like, you know, flip up on the screen on the iPad and be like, oh, let me Google it. Um, but I'm gonna write that down because I do want to see
Okay.
that, and I
All right.
can't.
And let me know what that means.
Yeah, borderline personality disorder. Borderlines are,
Okay.
well, okay, people with borderline
Okay.
personality disorder, I apologize.
No, yeah, yeah, we,
They're not murderers. They're not terrible people. It's a very difficult, it often develops because of a long history of severe trauma through
mhm,
childhood is one of the factors. So it is a miserable thing to live with, and they deserve all the help that they can get.
mhm. Here's a good question for you there, Dr. Susan. Does the doctor think the first grader who shot the teacher fits into the budding psychopath mold, or is that behavior something even more severe?
Um, I I have no idea because I don't I vaguely heard about that,
Hmm.
and so I don't know
Yeah, I
what
mean,
the
you're
situation
talking about a child,
with the kid
first grader.
was.
Yeah, I mean, you're what,
Yeah.
6 years old. I mean, you your ability to judge what's right and wrong at that point is extremely limited.
Yeah, even more so, I think the consequences
Yes.
of the actions. What is, does a 6-year-old understand that death is permanent? Um, yeah, and I don't know if I don't know anything about that kid.
Okay. Yeah, I have
I'm
neither.
sure that I certainly hope that that kid is getting looked at
Of
and
course.
getting a lot of treatment. And I did see something that the teacher was actually very forgiving of him. Um, and so that I don't, and I didn't, yeah, I don't know, but I did say, I was like, oh, wow, you
Yeah.
know, oh, wow.
All right. Mouthy 187 says, "Do most psychopaths have conduct disorder in their childhood?"
Yes. It's, yeah, yeah,
All right.
All right.
yeah. You'll see it early.
Joan says, "What is the motive in taking two victims?" That is such. There are so many variables for that. Was it necessity? Was it something unexpected? But what's your thoughts on it?
Um, was it the fantasy
Yes. Yes.
too?
Uh-huh.
Um, was um,
But it's
you
so
know,
rare for a single offender to target to that it would have to be some strong
mm-hmm,
uh, uh, risk and everything else because uh, as a offender, being able to control two is it's not just twice. You're looking at the risk factor is not just double; it's far more than that. Um,
mm-hmm.
and but
In a public place,
oh
out in
yeah,
the open, there's people all around. Um, yeah, I,
and that's why it's so rare for a single offender to take two.
mm-hmm.
You have to have absolutely something that will control those.
Yeah, there had to be a reason. I, yeah, it could be a fantasy. It could be that, um, I want to, the sort of the narcissism and the ego. Well, these people only get one girl at a time. I'm going to get two,
Hmm.
and then next it's going to be three, and next it's going to be four.
Whoa.
Um, I, from the psychologist's point of view, I would, it something sick and twisted.
All right. Nikki has a $5. Thank you. Appreciate that support. And what is your opinion of Dr. Lewis's diagnosis of Letitia Stout?
Okay. Uh, um, I watched part of that because I was interested in seeing the testimony of the experts, and I'm imagining that since the the prosecution experts did not diagnose her with that, that I think I know who this woman is. Um, I would strongly disagree with that diagnosis.
Okay.
Um, I would, I would, I, you know, no, I,
Okay. All right.
I would disagree with
All right.
that.
All right. Last one. Josh the Posh. Is it a thing to diagnose with psychopathy? Or is it something that you can't really add up until later in life?
Well,
This is a good
psycho, psychopath itself is not. a diagnosis in the DSM-5-TR, which is the book that diagnoses come from. It is most similar to the diagnosis would be antisocial personality disorder with some sort of added on, but it is an accepted term to use in describing people. So what you would more likely diagnose a child that's showing signs like this, they also wouldn't receive antisocial personality disorder because they're not an adult. So they would likely receive a diagnosis of conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder. And because they're going to be demonstrating those kinds of behaviors, and you know, unless there's something else going on, but you know, you see, I have very little experience with kids, some in grad school. I worked my whole career with adults, but you see some kids and you're like, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a great show tonight, and we're approaching the hour and a half now, and we
Yeah,
appreciate.
sorry.
Oh no,
Oh, okay.
this. I mean, we're not talking about a simple topic here. This is something that's absolutely fascinating, and because you know there is evil out there, and what's driving that evilness in our society has to be looked at, and um, I look forward to the day that we have a better understanding of it. And I'm sure our understanding now is far greater than what it was uh, 50 years ago. But,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. And just even in the past 20 years.
oh, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. But I want to absolutely thank you for coming on tonight. You got any final words or anything?
I'm I'm looking forward to all those documents being
Oh,
released
oh,
in
yes, next
Delphi
week
next
for
week.
Rick. Oh,
Yeah.
goodness. I
Yeah.
am too. I can't
Yeah.
wait to see that. That's going to tell a story that needs to be told, and we'll be able to look at that. But I'm going to throw you backstage right quick, and I
All
want to thank
right. And
everybody for.
thank everyone for
Well,
the
Thank
donations and
you.
the kind words and
all
the
right,
great questions.
absolutely. But we appreciate everybody being here tonight, and we look forward to seeing y'all soon. Y'all stay safe out there. Thank all our mods. Thank all the contributions and everyone that watched. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it, sub, and we appreciate it. And we'll see y'all soon, guys.
Take care. Have a good one. Which one you gonna leave it on? That